In this video, we'll talk about what is a macro and how we can record it. A macro is nothing but just an automation. It's just a recording of the steps that you do on a regular basis. So technically, it is only for the repetitive tasks that we do. For example, on a daily basis, we create a report. But for that, we fetch the data from a different program, like SAP. If we fetch the data, it doesn't come in a manner that we want. So first we clean it. We use text to column, we format the data, we create a table, we create a pivot table, we create charts and everything. Now all these steps doesn't require any kind of analysis. So this is a kind of a labor work that we do on a regular basis. So what we can do is that we can record all these steps and Excel will do that for us when we play those steps on a similar set of data. That is a macro. Now what happens is when you start recording a macro and whatever you do, your keyboard and mouse actions will get converted into a language and will get saved at the backstage of Excel. And after that, you can sense it out that you can have a huge list of those steps. It will become a program. And when you play that macro on a similar set of data, it will go through with each and every statement that is being recorded. And it will do the steps exactly the same as you did earlier. Now, if I ask you one question, that is, if we have a column in which we have some values in that, and I want you to record a macro that will count the total number of values in that column. You need to record a macro for that. So what we'll do, we'll start recording the macro, we'll come at the end of that column and we'll put a formula which is either count or count A, depends on the values, and then we'll stop the recording, and in future if we have a similar set of data, we can just go ahead and play the macro and it will put the formula for us and show us the result. But what if I'll give you a workbook that contains a lot many worksheets into that, and I ask you to record a macro that will count the number of worksheets in a workbook. You'll start recording the macro, and then what formula will you put over there? Actually, there is no formula to count the number of worksheets. That is why something which is not available, we cannot record it. Simple. Only things which are available in Excel that can be recorded, and that is a drawback of macro recording. Because if you think your daily routine at your workstation, you do a lot of things which are not there in Excel. That is why you take a lot of time to complete the task. And something which is not there, we can create it using that language. And that language is known as VBA, Visual Basis for Application. It means something which is not there, you can go at the backstage of Excel and then you can type in to communicate with Excel and you can create anything. As you have seen that we have discussed about solver add-in, which was not the part of Excel. So that is something has been created using that coding, that VBA language. So I hope that you got the idea that something which is not there in Excel, we cannot record it, but we can create it. But for that, we need to have a knowledge of VBA, that is Visual Basis for Application. But something which is already there and that you do on a daily basis, that you can record as a macro and you can play it. So let's see how we can record a macro. There are three ways to record a macro. One way is, you can see this View tab. Under the View tab on the right hand corner, we have this group of macros. And when you click over here, you can see an option which is Record Macro. This is way number one. Way number two is this Developer tab. If you do not have that tab right now, what we can do is we can enable it. How? We need to go to File. In that, we need to go to Options or Excel Options. There we have an option which is Customize Ribbon. So the option is available only for Excel 2010, 13 and 2016 users. If we go with customized ribbon, you can see a developer option is coming over here, which may be unchecked in your system. So just check it and press OK. Those who are using the previous version, which is Excel 2007, you can come to this tab, which is in the name of Popular in your system. In Popular, on the right hand side over here, somewhere over here, you will find Show Developer tab with a checkbox. Just click on that and press OK. Now you can see the developer tab, and there you can see Record Macro option. The third way to record a macro is bottom left corner, this small icon. This is to record a macro. If it is not there, you can just right click on this ready and you can see a lot of options over there. In the middle, you can see macro recording, which is checked in my system. You can just click, it will be checked, and you can see the option here. So just make sure one thing, from now onwards, whatever we are going to discuss, you should be on the same page. Else will not be able to match our coding. So just make sure that your cursor is on cell A1. Now just click on any of the ways to record a macro and it will open up the box for us, record macro. Right now you can see macro name. So we are going to put a name. But for that, let's discuss that what we are going to record. We are going to record a very simple macro that will write our name in Excel whenever we play the macro. That's it. Okay. So macro name, there are three things that you need to consider. This macro name should not contain any spaces. Number 2, no special characters. Number 3, cannot start with a number. It means you cannot start a macro name with any number. It should not be one macro, it will not accept it. If it is macro 1, it will accept it. So right now, just give it a name as name 1. Shortcut key. Now you can see the option is available only with control key. If I give any key over here, any alphabet, that will overwrite the original shortcut. If I say control A, it will overwrite the select all shortcut, which is already present with control A. So that is why we do not assign a shortcut with control. But when we click inside this box, we'll press shift on your keyboard and then press N. So it will be control shift N automatically. Then store macro in. This is important. There are 3 places where we can store a macro. This workbook, new workbook, and personal macro workbook. If you go with this workbook, it means this very workbook that you can see. If we go with this workbook, it means whenever we do something or record something, all those actions will get converted into the language, which is VBA, and will get saved at the backstage of this very workbook. But it doesn't mean that we will be able to play the macro only in this workbook. No. We will be able to play the macro in any workbook. The only thing is that we need to remember is we have to keep the workbook open in which we have the macro. If it is open, we can run the macro in that workbook or any other workbook open on our system. The only advantage of going with this workbook is that if we share this workbook with someone, that person will also be able to run the macro. I hope that you may have come across this kind of workbook in which you can see a button, and when you click on the button, something happens. So that's a macro has been recorded and in this workbook only. The next option is new workbook. New workbook, if I go with this option, it will open a new workbook. Whatever work we are doing in this workbook, all the action that are converting into a language will get saved at the backstage of that very workbook, not in this workbook. The advantage of this is that if I share this workbook with someone, they will not get the coding or the macro. They will not able to run the macro. And that will be there in our system in new workbook. The last thing is personal macro workbook. Assume this, that after doing this lecture, you may create 10 odd macros in the coming month. And you may have recorded all these macro in different time as and when required. Now you have 10 odd workbooks in which you have these 10 macros and you are using them every day. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to run any macro in any workbook, you have to first open it. It means that we are opening 10 workbooks on a daily basis and we are closing it. Now, Personal Macro Workbook is the solution for that problem. The purpose of this workbook is to store the macros only. If we go with this workbook, the advantage is that Personal Macro Workbook is always open on our system whenever we open Excel program, but it is also hidden. It means it will not make any hindrance in our work, but as it is always open whenever we open Excel, all the macros which are saved in this workbook, in Personal Macro Workbook, will be available for us to run. So right now we'll go with Personal Macro Workbook, and if you want to write any description you can, because just by name it would be very difficult to understand that what about this macro. So you can type in the description if you want, else it is optional. So you can go ahead and press OK, but before that I'm telling you again, please make sure that your cursor is on A1. Press OK. Now you can see that recording is on. You can see that the color is changed to white. In 2007 and 10 it changed to blue. Over here also. So stop recording option is coming. So now we are on cell A1. So just start doing the work. Now onwards, whatever we do will get recorded. So let's see. We'll type in our first name, enter, and then last name, enter. That's it. Now just go ahead and stop the recording. Now these two steps are being recorded. Now I'll insert a new worksheet by clicking on this plus sign, this worksheet, and I want to run the macro. How we can run the macro? We have already assigned a shortcut which is Control Shift N, and there we go. My name is there in these cells. Now do one thing. Insert a new worksheet again, but put your cursor somewhere in the middle, not on cell A1, and then run the macro, which is Control Shift N. When you do so, you can see that my first name is coming correctly, but my second name is approaching cell A2 and my cursor is resting on cell A3, which is not intended. So that is why there is some problem with this macro. Actually, the problem is nothing, but the only thing is that macros works on absolute reference by default. As we have discussed this in VLOOKUP exercises, that Excel works on relative references, but macro works on absolute references. So that is why if you want to get the results over there only, we have to first change this absolute reference to relative reference. So that is why we are going to click on this use relative reference once. Now it is highlighted. It means now onwards, if I create any macro, that will take only relative references. This will not change the references, the macros that we have already recorded. I'll go to the next worksheet again. Let's record a macro again. Make sure that your cursor is on A1 and let's see the difference now. Through any of the ways we can record a macro. Now we are going to name this macro as name 2. Let's avoid any shortcut key. Let's see how we can access those macro which do not carry any shortcut key. Store macro in Let It Be Personal Macro Workbook, and now just press OK. Once you press OK, recording is on, that you can see. Now I'm gonna again write my name, my first name, enter, last name, enter. Again I'll go ahead and stop the recording. I'll go to the next worksheet again and I'll put my cursor anywhere in the middle. Now I need to run the macro. So there are again couple of ways through which we can run the macro. Under the developer tab on the left hand side, we have this macros big option. This is to view the macro. Or under view tab over here, view macros, or the shortcut for this is Alt F8, that is function F8 key. And there you can see all the macros which are available right now. So this is name 1 macro and this is name 2 macro. It is showing us personal.xlsb, reason being because we are not standing in that workbook. if we have saved this macro or stored this macro in this workbook, in that case it would have shown us only name1 and name2 without the name of the workbook. So we'll go with this one, name2, and we'll click on run. You can see now it is working perfectly fine. So in the next video we are going to see the next example of recording a meaningful macro. Thank you.